Good evening. We understand today the methods of primary collection of data. We have basically understood what we mean by primary data and secondary data. We understand the one where we actually collect the data as the primary source of data, and where the data is collected by someone else, we treat it as a secondary source of data. In primary data collection, we have got 6 methods with the help of which this data can be collected. The first one is direct personal observation. Here, the investigator directly contacts the respondent and asks questions about the study pertaining to the study, and here there is direct contact between the investigator and the respondent. The second method, which is indirect oral interview, here there is no direct contact with the there is no direct interview, but the questions are asked to the persons who are closely related to the one who is involved in the matter, like in sensitive issues, or where illegal activities or questions related to wealth or any such studies are undertaken. Then indirect method or indirect oral interview, this method comes to be of more help. The third method is the mailed questionnaire method. The investigator can prepare a questionnaire, which is a set of questions, and mail it to the respondents of interest. So the respondents will fill in the questionnaire and it will be sent back to the principal investigator. So mailing of questionnaire, here there is no contact between the respondent and the one who is answering, but yet the mailed questionnaire method can be very effective. The fourth method is the scheduled method, where in scheduled method the investigator himself does not contact the respondent, but in case where in the rural areas where people are not illiterate, so people are not literate, they are not able to understand the questions asked, then there is a enumerator who is trained for this purpose. So this enumerator's job is to act as a person who will make them understand the questions, and with the help of the enumerators they are trained in such a way that the respondents give the answers to the question in the way that they are to be expected. So schedule method is very effective, especially in the backward say areas or in the rural areas. Then there are local agents. With the help of local agents, you can directly contact the agent, and he is the person who will try to get the data filled, or he will get you the respondents whatever questions need to be answered. The agent does the work and the data reaches the investigator. Then the last method is the online survey method. Online, as we know, as the activities um can take place in the online survey. So here the questionnaire can be directly once again mailed through it, or it can be nowadays even sent through with the help of Google Forms. So Google Forms also is a very effective way, or an online survey can also help the investigator to uh, get the required primary data. We next come to the methods of collecting secondary data. Secondary data is primarily collected in two ways. One is the published source of data, and another one is the unpublished source. So in published source, you have got reports, you have got publications, you have got journals and magazine who are being published monthly, bi-monthly, or maybe yearly or quarterly. So these publications, these reports, these magazines, they can be referred, and one can easily get the sources of get the secondary data from this, which will not be collected by the investigator himself, and therefore it becomes a secondary data collection method. Secondary data collection also involves one more method, which is known as the unpublished source. So in unpublished sources, all the data of the government also need not be published everywhere. So there are some such uh, some such material which is not published, but yet it can be a very reliable source of data, like the records by the NGOs or the unpublished research material of some research scholars, what they published, say thesis and all, need not be published, but they are available in the university libraries, and one can always go through them as a secondary source of data. We now understand what we mean by tabulation of data. So process of consolidating raw data is known as classification or tabulation. As we have understood so far, we are trying to understand the different ways with the help of which what are the types of data, what is the nature of the characteristic, what are the sources of data and how they are being collected. And the next step to data collection is the putting the data in a proper form, so that it can be, its behavior, its nature can be studied, and thereby interpretations can be drawn on the basis of the data that has been collected. So we try to prepare the data in the form of a table, and the table is prepared on the basis of the principles of classification. That is, we can classify the items which are having similar characteristics or similar in nature into one group, and thereby we can form the tables accordingly, or the groups accordingly can be formed, and we can classify and tabulate the data. So this classification can be faculty wise, or it can be the classification of students if you are talking about in a college, like year wise classification. Then within that you can have the males and females, that is sex wise classification. Also you can have the category wise, that is the open class or the reserve class, something of that sort. On the basis of this, we can club the units or the samples or the items which fall in this particular category, and prepare the table accordingly. So classification enables identifying a specific pattern in the data. The data becomes very easy to access because we are classifying them specially on the basis of their similar characteristics. So data are generally classified on the basis of attributes and variables. So attribute, as we know, is qualitative data, and variable we know as the numeric data or the quantitative data. Attributes are further classified as simple classification or multiple classification. The presence of an attribute is denoted by a capital letter, and the absence of the attribute is generally denoted by a small letter. So this type of classification we call as the dichotomy classifications, where we are having two classes, presence of the attribute and of course the absence of the attribute. So if we are saying long hair, then A represents the presence of long hair, and alpha will represent, say for example, that the long hair is not there or the hair is short in nature. So this type of classification is perfectly possible in case of attributes. Multiple classification comes into consideration when we are trying to classify the dichotomous classification into further classes, like within the males and females we can have the group as how many of them are employed or how many are not employed, what is the literacy level, or they are graduates or whether they are postgraduates or whether they are just HSC. So this type of classification is perfectly can be done with the help of which we can categorize as multiple or generally multiple classification. We call the process of data condensation for convenience in presentation, processing and interpretation as tabulation. So we have to conveniently handle the data, we have to present it in a very nice form which can be interpreted, and of course we have to process the data for analysis. So tabulation of data forms a very important component of the entire data collection method, and of course the data classification part. So we understand what are the basic components of a table. A table should ideally have a table number along with a title. Then it should have the row headings and the column headings, like rows are representing what and columns are representing what, that should be mentioned, which we call as stubs and captions. Then the body of the table has to be perfect, in the sense that whatever data we are trying to input in the table, that has to be given properly. Also, the table should have a footnote and a source note and the units of measurement given at the end of the table, like whether the data is in tons, whether the data is in thousands, whether whatever will be the unit, that has to be mentioned. And it is also necessary that the source from where the data is collected needs to be mentioned at the end of the table. So we next have the exact table as shown over here. We have the workers in a factory according to sex and location in thousands. So you can see over here, the location is the, say, the row heading, and the row heading location is including three categories. So we have got urban, rural, and then the total is given. And even in the column heading, you have got two columns, male, female, and the last column is the total. So here you can see very nicely that the row and the column headings are there. There is also a table number which is given, table number 1, which is showing the workers in a factory according to sex and location in thousands. The source, of course, is given as office records. Then the footnote shows that figures are rounded to the nearest thousands. So these are some of the this can be called as an ideal table, which is including all the essential parts that we have mentioned earlier. So we now see the merits and demerits of the table. A table is the one which simplifies complex data and it facilitates the comparison. If you have to compare two cities, two countries, or even two regions, or two students, or two colleges, two hospitals, anything, if you have to compare, then the table will always be of great help, because the data is presented properly, and therefore it facilitates a very much easier comparison. It's easy for graphical presentation also. If you have to plot the data in the form of a graph, then the table definitely reveals the prominent features of the data. So you can definitely take the table and refer to the table and try to plot the line graph or the bar graph or histogram, whatever you want to. You can represent the data in a graphical presentation. Some of the demerits can be that the table preparing is a little time consuming, and therefore since it represents only numbers, it lacks the description of the data. That is one major drawback of the table. And also tables can be simple, complex, and they can be general, or they can be very specific according to the nature of the data. But on the whole, if you go to see, this tabulation or preparation of tables definitely proves to be beneficial if you are going in for a data analysis, statistical data analysis. We now come to the attributes. So we classify attributes into two disjoint classes, as we have already seen earlier. Presence of the attribute or the absence of the attribute, and we have called it as a dichotomous classification. So as we can understand that A is capital A represents that the person is illiterate, whereas alpha will represent that the absence of the attribute or the person being illiterate. Okay, so we have got class frequencies, the different attributes, their subgroups and combinations. They are called as the different classes, and a number of observations assigned to each of these classes, we call them as the class frequencies. So if you have got k attributes under study, then the total number of class frequencies will be 3 raised to k. Say for example, if k is equal to 2, then the total number of class frequencies will be 3 square, which is equal to 9. So we have a 2 cross 2 contingency table as shown over here. We have got the two attributes A and B, and alpha and beta represents the absence of A and absence of B respectively. So the 2 cross 2 table shows us that the entry in the first cell will be AB, then we have got alpha B, then you have got A beta, and lastly alpha beta. So the row total in the first row is equal to B, the column second row it is equal to beta, and the column total you can say is equal to total A and alpha. So A plus alpha and B plus beta, that is equal to capital N, okay. So we now understand what we mean by the relationship between the class frequencies. The frequency of lower order class can always be expressed in terms of a higher order class frequency. So n is equal to A plus alpha, B plus beta, that we have already seen, and A is equal to AB plus A beta, alpha is alpha B plus beta alpha, and similarly B and beta we have written down the cell frequencies and the corresponding relationship. So we consider now what we understand by consistency of data. There are two conditions for which need to be satisfied if we are saying that the data is consistent. So all cell frequencies that we have defined earlier, or all class frequencies, they need to be positive, and all relations between the class frequencies need to be satisfied. So some certain relations, if any of them is not satisfied, or even any of the class frequency happens to be negative, then we can directly conclude that the data is not consistent. So this two conditions definitely have to be satisfied for data to be consistent. So when we have got one attribute, you can see these conditions for one attribute, for two attributes, and of course for three attributes. For one attribute, we have got only two conditions, that is A greater than 0, then alpha greater than 0, and for two attributes you have got four conditions, that is AB greater than 0, alpha B greater than 0, then AB less than A, and of course AB greater than A plus B minus N. When we have got three attributes, these are the 8 conditions that we have listed down over here. The last condition, that is maximum of 0 and AB plus AC minus A, or BC plus AB minus B, then AC plus BC minus C is less than or equal to ABC, is less than minimum of AB, BC, AC, AB plus BC plus AC plus A plus B plus C minus N. Whenever we are checking the consistency, or when we are trying to find out the cell frequencies, all this relationship have to be satisfied. We have to check for consistency conditions depending upon the number of attributes. So one example that is shown over here. Of course, we will be covering the examples in our practical session, but even then the test, to test whether the data is consistent, we have got N, A, B, AB, and we find that AB is negative. So AB happens, alpha beta happens to be minus 50, and AB greater than A plus B minus N is not satisfied. Therefore, we say that the data is inconsistent. We now talk about the independence of attributes. If the attributes are said to be independent of each other, if the presence or absence of one attribute, it does not affect the presence or absence of the other. For example, color of the skin and intelligence of a person are two independent attributes. Color of the skin does not affect the intelligent quotient, and vice versa. So then in this case, we say that A and B are totally independent of each other, and generally we calculate the expected frequency AB as A into B upon N, or we calculate as alpha into beta upon N. If you are considering two such variables where they are related to each other, like long hair is dependent upon the presence of long hair in the mother, that is the gene comes from there, then you can say that they are dependent attributes, or that quality can be called as a dependent attribute. Two attributes are said to be associated if they are not independent, as simple as that. That is, they are related to each other in some way or the other. So we say positive association exists in the attributes A and B if AB is greater than A into B divided by N. If AB happens to be less than A into B upon N, then the association between the attributes happens to be negative. If A and B are such that A always occurs with B and never with beta, then they are said to be completely associated. And if A never occurs with B, that is AB is equal to 0, then the attributes are said to be completely dissociated. So, to understand the association of attributes, we define what we mean by Yule's coefficient of association. So, Professor Yule has given us a formula to measure the degree of association. It is a relative measure of association between two attributes A and B. So, we have distinct combinations of AB, A beta, alpha B and alpha beta. Then we define Yule's coefficient of association as AB into alpha beta minus A beta into alpha B divided by AB into alpha beta plus A beta into alpha B. So, Yule's coefficient is denoted by capital Q and essentially it lies between the range of -1 to +1. So, at both the extremes, when Q is equal to +1, there is perfect positive association between the two attributes A and B. If Q takes the value -1, then there is a perfect negative association between the attributes A and B. If Q happens to be 0, then A and B are said to be, of course, independent of each other, that is, association is totally absent. So, from Yule's coefficient of association, we are defining next as the Yule's coefficient of colligation, that is y is equal to square root of AB into alpha beta minus square root of A beta into alpha B divided by square root of AB into alpha beta plus square root of A beta into alpha B. So we can establish the relationship between Q and Y, that is coefficient of association and coefficient of colligation. They are related to each other with the equation given as Q is equal to 2y upon 1 plus y square. So this relationship we shall be deriving in our live session, where we actually establish Q is equal to 2y upon 1 plus y square, and also we shall be seeing some practical examples as to whether the data is consistent or not, or some such examples where we can understand association of attributes in a little better manner. Thank you.